Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group. And today we're going to be talking about a little bit of group coverage, though we won't be talking exclusively true group coverage. That is really saved for our Thursday study group. If you're not part of that Thursday study group, we can certainly get you on that list if you're interested in doing long-term care planning for groups of employees. But we're going to talk about how individual and group coverage kind of fit into this picture of group long-term care, which is really exploding in popularity and interest, and where they may actually complement each other and work together, where to use maybe one or the other, and kind of the benefits and drawbacks of each. So I think they do a really good job of complementing and contrasting with each other. So again, it's all down to kind of being a really good consultant and being able to find the right fit for each specific group. But group is something that we have put a lot of chips into over the last few years. After the Washington CARES Act, we saw that there was a really, really strong market for group long-term care. There was a lot of things that we liked about that side of the business that, made it something we wanted to invest in and really start to run in the direction of. So Mark and I are going to kind of go through a little bit of kind of our journey, but also talk about individual versus group for group. Interesting title. I don't know exactly a better title I could have chosen, but Mark, anything you want to add to that before we kind of get into the meat of the presentation?
No, I think there's no right or wrong answer to these questions. I think it's important to be consultative and present the options that clients have and let them be a part of that decision as well. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you share it with them. So we'll try to be, somewhat agnostic. Obviously, we have our own preferences with what's worked best for us anecdotally in the past. But most of these solutions have trade-offs, and it's just important to recognize that.
Yeah,
The markets
and
are constantly changing too. We're seeing new options all the time, and that can change, your calculus. The one thing I would advise you not to do is to say something is never a good fit. We don't like to use the words never and always anyway, but I always said this to people when I was an actuary. I would say, never say never because some actuary is going to prove you wrong.
yeah,
They're going to
yeah.
come out with something new, and just keep an open mind that there are solutions out there that may surprise you that they work.
Yeah, and it's not a one or the other proposition exclusively. I think about that salsa commercial back in the day where they were trying to decide between hard tacos and soft tacos, and a little girl speaks up and says, "Por qué no los dos?" It applies here, for sure. So I want to talk about just kind of like the major differences between working with a group with individual products and working with a group with what we would call true group products. Number one is obviously there are far more choices of product type right now on the individual side of the market. That is something we also expect to change a bit. I don't think we'll ever get to the amount of product flexibility and product availability that we have on the individual side with annuity long-term care, short-term care, all sorts of different alternatives out there. But again, never say never. At the end of the day, though, we are going to start seeing more product types show up on the group market, but on the individual market right now, you just have such a wide array of options that, one of the really great things that individual products do for the group market is help in those cases where a blanket group offering is not one size fits all. And Mark and I are trying to create a very big paradigm shift in this market to get groups, employers, associations, whoever it may be, open to the idea of complementary individual long-term care planning alongside the group plan. Now, there are a number of reasons that we'll unpack there, but one of the main reasons is that group long-term care offerings sometimes don't cover a wide range of ages. Now, they'll cover the low end very well. A lot of companies on the group side will cover you as low as age 18. That's a huge advantage for the group side. But carriers can cut off long-term care access to folks that are 65 and older with respect to Transamerica, 70 and older with respect to Allstate. Chubb is the only one I've seen that goes truly up to age 80, but benefits are restricted and there is medical underwriting for those folks who are above age 70. So that older market who maybe has failed to plan up to this point, may be a bit underrepresented in a group offer. So we're trying to always put out that, if you're a broker working on a group case with a true group plan, if you're a long-term care specialist, keep those individual solutions in your pocket because it's great to show an employer that you've done your homework. Hey, we've got a 72 and a 74-year-old on this census here. They're not going to be able to qualify for the true group offer, but I can plan with them individually to see if we have a product that can actually provide something for them, right?
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing, Jason, to that is carriers also may offer it at the older ages, but they can control the pricing
Right.
and they highly discourage it by making it very, very expensive to get. And it just won't look as attractive. And you don't want that business owner that's the key decision maker who just happens to be in that 65-year-old bracket, for example, say, like, this is too expensive.
Right.
Their employees who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s actually looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So you just have to be flexible, to understand that there's, like you said, a place for both and how to position both, so that they create the right solution together. Very infrequently are long-term care plans cookie cutter,
Yeah.
right? And the more you customize it to fit the group, the better results you'll get.
I would say there are a few people out there who have looked at group pricing as deeply as we have, and we notice with most carriers over age 60, it starts to hit a bit of a brand new age band as far as pricing. So yeah, just like you said, Mark, I mean, beyond not offering long-term care coverage to upper ages, in certain cases as a whole, um, the the plan maybe not even getting prohibitively expensive, but the pricing steps up in a way in older ages where the value can really start to go backwards. So that's another reason to, have a balance of both and have individual products in your back pocket because, hey, we've got something that's a bit more leverage for you over here if you'd like to look at that as well. Because at the end of the day, when we're working with groups, whether you're using an individual plan or a group plan, we want everybody to feel like they have, number one, an opportunity to participate, but number two, they have the opportunity to participate in a plan that they really feel comfortable with and like the value on and want to purchase at the end of the day. So that's where they really complement each other most of all. Um, so when we talk about like where individual can fit in, it's not just, and really the advantages, it's not just kind of filling in those gaps, but we just have a wider range of choices, right? From 10 pay single premium plans. You don't really see that right now on today's group market. So there's a lot of room to be technical with what you do with individual plans as of right now.
Yeah, I also want to highlight that the process, as we know, is a big part of the solution,
Yep,
sometimes as important as the product and pricing itself.
100%.
In order to get employers to endorse and promote their plans, it has to fit a model that they're comfortable with. And that's why I think True Group has an advantage in the work site, is you're offering another benefit in addition to benefits that the employer is used to offering in a similar type of way.
Yep,
The reason this is important is a big part of the value of the work site is the fact that you have an internal sales team effectively with HR and their staff actually communicating this benefit to everybody and helping you endorsing and promoting this. And that education, as we know, is what long-term care is all about. Without the education, nobody buys anything, group or individual.
yep,
So one of the reasons why I think the group market worksite association appeals to me is we have this loudspeaker that's just, putting out this messaging from somebody that's trusted, that's actually vetted you and vetted the product and has become almost an expert in it themselves. And that is what opens up the door to individual planning.
Right.
But in order to get there, sometimes you have to have a group product because that gets you out the gate from the start.
Yeah.
And if you start with an individual solution that's not comfortable, you may never make the sale. They may never get comfortable to promote it in the first place. So that's kind of a big part to me as well, is you can't get only focused on product, even though that's what we nerd out on here a lot on these calls. You got to really understand the client mentality and how to get your foot in the door, how to build things and building blocks to move it forward.
Yeah, and I would say individual products as of right now, are best used with smaller groups. Just because group products, you talked about the process, guaranteed issue underwriting. If you've got a good enrollment platform, making it easy for employees to enroll, things of that nature, you can supplement things like the education as a long-term care specialist and still do a great job. But when it comes to enrolling a 1,000 employee group, individual starts to become a 90-degree uphill, right? As far as how am I going to administer all of these? How am I going to get status on all of these? How am I going to complete the application product process with all of these folks, right? There's just a lot of hand holding needed. Each case has its own individual underwriting status, things of that nature. It just becomes difficult. That's where, True Group really shines. Um, and I think individual carriers in general, I don't see the interest right now, or I don't see the real proactiveness in setting up the ecosystem to become group friendly. But I will say there's one carrier who has kind of made more of a concerted effort, and that's NGL. I think it goes a little bit under advertised. They do talk about it a bit whenever we have Mike Simonstad on the call. He does talk about their worksite process, generally open to groups of 5+ employees. And I wanted to call on Rhonda because, Rhonda, I know you recently did a small group using NGL, and I wanted to just um, pick your brain for like 3 to 5 minutes if we could on just your experience in working with that group. Like what kind of group was it? How did you find the process? Were there any rocks in your shoe? Were there anything that you found a lot easier? And just your thoughts overall on the experience.
Yeah, so it started out just like any other appointment. I was working with a wife who wanted to bring in her husband, and they wanted a plan for extended care planning. And then as we started talking, found out that he is a partner in a business, and there's about five business partners that they own together. And started talking about the tax deductibility that they could have for that. And they were in a state that could have partnerships, so asset protection. So then next thing I know, the husband put me in front of the president, CEO, and the other three partners, and I did a lunch and learn session on that. Then they came back and said, I looked up with National Guardian Life, and they do have, and it is on their resource. So if you are contracted with NGL, you can go on the portal and look at other marketing material. I can't remember exactly which column it is, but it is on there, and it works site or something like that. And it has a table, it's a state table. So different states have a minimum, different minimum that the employer must pay for a premium. Now, it does not have to be a base amount. It's just if the employer is going to contribute. So you don't have to worry about it's got to be this much, that much, or whatever. But it is state specific how many in that state that the business is domiciled, how many applications that the employer must write a check for. So the employer said they would be willing to do that. Two of the five said no, they'd rather just take a year-end bonus check instead. So we had three of the employees, and two of them had spouses, so we included spouses on that. And then one of them was going through divorce, and so she had minor children, so she was CFO and she wanted long-term care. So ended up doing 2, 4. We ended up taking 5 applications on that case. Two of them got declined. two of the spouses got declined. Actually, one partner got declined and one spouse got declined. And then was able to turn and do bankers for 2 years to get partnership for those other declines. So in the end, it was still the company was willing to write a check for $20,000 for each of those people. So it was a small case. It was a nice small case, but they got good credible coverage and they were able to get some partnership asset protection behind it, which I always think is a nice perk. And then I was able to meet with them. And now that we uncovered what was really in their medical, maybe we could back out and find something else. As far as
I want to point out one thing, Rhonda. That's a small case for Rhonda. I think that's a pretty good case.
That's a nice case. Yeah.
yeah. So working with NGL was wonderful. Once you meet with them and they say they want to do that, I got in touch with Mike Simonstead. He immediately sent me the form. The forms are on the portal. You can print it out yourself. You get the business CFO, whoever it was, powers to be to fill out the form, sign it. And then Tom over at Life Care Solutions, I think within 24 hours, had me an approval with a group code number. And then that gave me permission to go ahead and start taking applications. It does go through full underwriting, just like, the good old days of modified underwriting, MetLife, John Hancock's Prudential. If any of you have been around long enough, remember those days where you had modified. Here it is still full underwriting, but they do get that additional 5% discount, which is nice. And actually, I'm sorry, it's not 5% discount. I think with NGL, it's gender-based rates prior to the female rates. So for some of those females, that was a big savings, like 35-40% savings. That was a really good thing for them. And went through underwriting. Some of them came out really quick and some of them took a little bit longer. So you just never know. But overall, it was great, great case. And yeah.
How did you find on the back end, Rhonda? Because I know they talk about like a streamlined approval process, streamlined status. How did you find that different from your experience, where you've probably had a couple apps at a time going with NGL and things, you know, rightfully so, are kept in their own silos in that case. But how did you find the experience working with that group application?
Well, I would tell you it was just like any other, like I submitted 5 other applications. One of the spouses got approved right out of the gate, and one of them had specialist after specialist trying to get notes. So some of them took longer than others. And then, so, some of them were approved and we're sitting here holding because we wanted to make sure we had all our 3
Yeah,
officially approved and paid for. So some of them we were kind of sitting here holding and holding and holding. But it was just as if you treated any of them. Now, I will
And then, and Rhonda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think NGL will give you a common effective date. So they're holding them, but they're all going to issue them on the same date, right?
correct. Now, the other thing is this happened about right at the tail end of 2024. So that was before NGL's got their new platform with their new application system where they're in real time already starting to do the RX scripts behind the scenes. So I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to do a case since then, Jason, to actually really experience that in real time underwriting.
sure. Sure. Well, thank you for sharing your experience there because we haven't personally done a case with NGL's worksite program yet. So good to hear from somebody who has. And
I
yeah,
think it's just important to keep in mind if you ever talk to somebody that is a business owner, and if they do say that they are a partner, ask them if you're a partner, you have a vested interest in each other maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Because if you have 3 people, I'm here in the Midwest, right? So we got a lot of adult children that inherited farms from parents. So maybe you got 3 or 4 siblings that all own a farm. They have a vested interest to make sure all the siblings are healthy because what happens if they don't have plan? And maybe it's the family farm, maybe there are different plots, different sections to it. But if one of them need care, and most in farmers in Midwest, most of their asset is the farmland because it's generating income, but they will not have enough income to pay for that 6, 8, 10, $12,000 a month bill. So that's when they start having to sell off part of that farm. So they have a vested interest as a business owner to make sure that they're all maintaining equal work and income. And when one falls, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other partners are able to buy out the other partners. Sometimes they can, but sometimes they can't. And likewise, let's say you have three business owners that are good old boys from high school, college days, started their own business, and maybe one of them have a spouse that now needs extended care. And because they own that business, they have an asset and they have an income. And so now it's the other two business partners want that third partner's spouse to make sure they're covered so it's not taken away from their business. So I just think if anything, it's a good conscientious to make sure you ask those questions if you're meeting with a business owner to say, are you have partners, and, ask more questions and say, do your partners have long-term care? Would they be interested? Would you like me to do a lunch and learn for everybody? Because you're kind of all in the same boat.
Yeah, that's super important and stuff we can overlook, if we're not careful. And I know like most of us are out there working with at least one or two business owners. So I would definitely take note of what Rhonda said and kind of use that going forward because that's really important for the conversation. And I think you also hit on a couple of other points where individual really has an advantage right now um, in working with groups. Tax deductibility for business owners being one of them. We get asked about that quite a lot. The predominant group plans right now, really all of them that are in the market are life long-term care hybrid plans. And though there's a lot of advantages to them, though those plans exist on the individual market, on the group side, they don't have those separately identifiable long-term care premiums yet from which we can deduct, employer-funded premiums, right? So that's a really, really big advantage that individual has now, and that we're trying to shout from the rooftops when we're able to meet with carriers saying, listen, this is one thing that could really separate you from the pack, especially right now, because individual carriers who are paying attention, who are really going to invest more on the worksite side, they're going to use this and they are going to have this incentive, this really, really important incentive that you don't yet, and they're gonna start to hoover up market share that way. So it's a conversation we're having, but it's an advantage that the individual side has right now for working with groups, which is, um, you know, it's odd to see that there are, so many advantages there, but I think the group side is trying to learn from the individual side as much as possible as well from those carriers that are really dedicated to the space.
Yeah. I'll put out also just kind of a if anybody's interested, we have like carriers that listen to this as well. We've been trying to find individual carriers that will allow us to give them a census and even a HIPAA authorization for each employee. These are small groups, and have them pre-underwrite them so they can tell us who's going to get approved and not approved before we do the enrollment. So there are ways even to use some of the instant RX and availability of electronic medical records to bridge the gap on the process side too. So like Rhonda was saying, she had to wait for the underwriting to be completed, which is probably a friction point, right? Well, if you get a census and they tell you who's approved and denied much quicker, and you can enroll everybody at the same time, knowing that they're pre-qualified, to me, that's a better experience potentially. So I think a lot of carriers kind of getting into that small group space, worksite space. John Hancock is one of those carriers, right, that came out with something recently. I think there's the opportunity to also adjust the underwriting to make it fit the group market better. And to Jason's point too, on the group side, there's ways for them to adjust their product to fit the tax deductibility better.
And
So
on
we're
both
trying
sides,
to
right,
nudge
there's
them.
there's such a mountain to climb to get to that point, right? There's huge process overhauls or invention of processes or inventions of filings, right? That really
Yeah,
need to
sure.
happen from the product side that make it tough. So it's like you spread the word now and you hope in 18 months you start to get some movement on it.
Well,
But
carriers are good at identifying competitors that have done it already and
right,
copying them. So
right,
sometimes all we need is one example that's worked well, one filing that's worked well. They just don't know about it, and we
right,
can point them in that direction. But these are not, I'll call it innovations that don't exist.
right.
Instant issue on the life insurance side is actually very common now, right? So there are ways to kind of address not having guaranteed issue, but having streamlined underwriting. And again, that's a proven model. All you have to do is go to your life insurance team and say, how do we build that? How do we administer that? Let's apply that to our individual hybrid that we want to offer into the work site. So
Yep.
I think it's just being thoughtful about where those good examples are and copying that.
Yeah. So, we've talked that obviously there's a lot of plan design flexibility with individual, but what we see on the group side that works so well is, in a lot of cases, a great degree of affordability of these plans relative to the value that you're getting out for long-term care, death benefit, that combination of both. Um, Another knock we've seen on group plans is inflation protection, right? I want something that's going to be growing over time. We do have one plan, unfortunately available only in 2 states right now, um, with Allstate that actually offers 5% compound inflation protection for the long-term care benefit on their whole life long-term care hybrid. Um, Now, you look at the pricing for this, and Mark, maybe it makes sense to do a little bit of an overview of that, but we're seeing affordability that is pretty incredible when you consider 5% compound inflation protection. Everybody on this call who works in long-term care knows that many times a carrier has to offer some 5% compound inflation protection, but that doesn't mean they can't put it on a shelf where nobody can afford it, right? I think in the group market there could be potential for more plans like this because we're, enrolling so many employees at one time that the carrier is able to feel comfortable with the spread of risk that they're getting to be able to offer more affordable, more interesting plan designs. I think that's an innovation that people are definitely watching Allstate to kind of see how this goes. But Mark, any thoughts on that plan and just inflation protection in the group market in general?
Yeah, of course, having the ability to add more comprehensive coverage, when clients need it is important. It is an objection, we run into, can I have my cake and eat it too,
Yep.
essentially. I think because the group carriers assume more lapse, and some of you might red flag go up, no, are we going through this same situation like we saw with traditional long-term care again? No, I think there's real data behind the fact that, there's just a different dynamic in policyholder behavior. When you're buying it through your employer, whether it's employer funded, and then the employee has to pay for it when they take it into retirement. Obviously, that changes whether people want to keep it or maybe they reduce their coverage if they're paying it voluntary. There's different behavior there too. So I think there's a legitimate case to be made. They have data to show that the persistency, people keeping their policies is lower on the worksite side. So there's more room or margin for error there, right, in terms of pricing some of those more comprehensive benefits. But not every carrier is going to be comfortable with that, and obviously you want to still do business the right way, right? So you have a good block of risk, that you're giving to the carrier. The guaranteed issue obviously is also something that would be very concerning to folks on the individual side that have, gone through the past and have seen traditional group products. But to your point, if you're employer funding a whole case and you're getting a spread of risk, everyone's paid for, there's not adverse selection really in that type of group, then perhaps, guaranteed issue underwriting can make sense from an actuarial perspective. So I do think you have to think differently, but there's going to be naysayers. We run into it each and every day on both sides, right? Are the carriers, rational to be offering it this way? And, how do you think of the value proposition? And does it, you assume that group products have to be much more expensive when in fact, when we look at the numbers, we've seen some of those products, like the one with the 5%, to be less expensive than an individual product. Very counterintuitive to see that. But there's a reason why it's happening. That's, there's some thought that's gone into that. It's not, that somebody has not, has let the fox into the hen house and there's going to be some bad things that are happening.
Yeah, and just like in the case that Rhonda shared with us in True Group cases that we're doing every single day, either small or even a portion of larger groups, I think that's one of the reasons why we are so insistent on employer funding. And have a lot of belief in what it does to create good outcomes, not just from uh, a participation standpoint, because a certain layer of participation becomes automatic, but to the spread of risk you're talking about, right? If we were to just like let a group go all voluntary, there's a much different sort of spread of risk there. When it's the employee's choice as to whether or not they'll participate and their money that they're putting up, guess who's going to be most likely to be the first one in line, super excited to purchase a plan and purchasing up into about as high of a level of guaranteed issue as they can? Generally, people who are more at risk of being a long-term care claim, in general, unhealthy folks who don't represent as good of a spread of risk. So, employer funding, if you're covering a swath of employees who either would or wouldn't purchase voluntarily on their own, you get, a wider range of sort of health outcomes as opposed to adverse selection, right?
Yeah, and Jason, I'll give you another example of the more tools we have in our toolkit, product feature wise, the more solutions we can bring in to clients that have unique needs. So we're working right now with a group of clergy, and the diocese has funding to pay for post-retirement benefits for the clergy. In fact, they're paying for their long-term care out of pocket, right? Dollar for dollar, because when the clergy needs care, they pay for the provider directly. And we have a product on the group side which would cover all the actively at work clergy, even up to age 70, like you were talking about, where we could basically prepay for their care through the group long-term care policy. And one of the reasons they really like this concept is on the group side, we also have this concept of restoration of the death benefit, which for those of you that remember traditional long-term care, full return of premium, you get your long-term care and you always get the life insurance as well. Okay, the death benefit on top of that. So they say, well, what if we just pay this for all the clergy and we assign the death benefit to the church? So when they pass away, the money comes back into their coffers. And kind of like your description of like the partners, Rhonda, in the firm and protecting each other, this solution made a lot of sense because they're going to get some leverage on the long-term care benefits. They're getting kind of the premiums almost back like a return of premium, but in the form of the death benefit. Whether or not they use long-term care, they get that back, right? And so we're talking to their actuary now, and I'm sure he's thinking to himself, like, why does this sound too good to be true? What's the catch, right? With all this working. So we have to go through the mechanics. But it just opens up a situation where we can insure people and again have that funding be a no-brainer. So if you can create reasons, and we're trying to work with the carriers to create more reasons, tax deductibility is a big one, but there's other reasons how you can be creative to do these types of policies and solve the client's primary needs. And in the case of employer funding, you have to solve the business's needs, right? There's a lot of employers that are generous and offer rich benefits, but by and large, the vast majority are going to say like, well, if I can offer this voluntary and let them pay out of pocket, let the people choose who want it, they're going to take the easy button, the easy path there. But as we know, the employer funding really drives the participation, even on the voluntary side. And you have to find creative ways to get them to fund some, to put some skin in the game, right? And there's a lot of creative ways you can do that.
100%. And, you know, again, just down to amount of available options. You know, we believe that there will be traditional long-term care options in the group space soon. Who knows what they will look like as far as underwriting or rates, plan design, but a couple of things that we would really look forward to is number one, having an option for tax deductibility, but also like Rhonda said, I think bringing partnership protection to the group side is also a massive thing because for those middle market folks, that extra asset protection against that Medicaid spend down is a huge thing to bring to larger and larger groups of people. So, it remains to be seen what these products will really look like at the end of the day, how they'll be underwritten, a lot of the administration, things like that. But there are things that the true group side is waiting for if you're folks like us who, came up in the individual world.
Yeah, and you should just lean into your strengths too. When the carriers ask us what our opinion is about what they should launch, 10 pay, guess what we don't have on the group side right now? 10 pays. I think that they will say, hey, if you prepay your premiums, they're probably okay with that risk too. So maybe they'll come out with innovation on the group side too. But like you said, if it's a work site traditional product that has 10 pay already, it checks a big box there from a certain type of clientele, that meets their needs, right? Pre-retirement funding, essentially. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we're going to see more and more of those. So again, another good reason to be on these calls, to be a specialist in this market, is you're going to have a lot of new opportunities cropping up.
Yeah, because it's not like group long-term care was born in 2021. We all know that. We just, are in a situation where group long-term care kind of disappeared for a while when the Unums, Genworths, etc. stopped offering, sort of true group plans. And many of you have probably seen a copy of a policy from one of those older group plans. They gave you a menu where you can kind of select your benefit package, maybe choose one out of these four, right? And underwriting and stuff was varied depending on who was offering it and who they were offering it to. But I think we'll start to see more and more. I want to see more cross-pollination, honestly. That's part of the inspiration for having this study group in general is I want to get the individual side of the study group and the people who watch those recordings a little more awareness on the group side, but also just um, carriers and thought leaders and administrators of both group and individual long-term care. They really should start learning from each other a bit more because the outcome is going to be really great for clients, employees, association members, and agents overall. Just having the ability to scale their education, work with more people, create good outcomes, right? At the end of the day, that's what we all want. There's things to want on either side of the fence, depending on which side of the fence you start on, right? So a little more talking to each other and being together in the same room and going over what works and what doesn't is going to go a long way.
Yeah, one other big thing I don't think we mentioned as much today, but it's really important to realize is the number one objection is price,
Yes.
affordability. And the average premium, when I look at the LIMRA surveys, will continue to go higher on the individual side. Well, if the average consumer is willing to pay $1,000 to $2,000 a year, and our average price point on the individual side is $3,500 a year, we're missing the mark in terms of that mass market segment. And part of it is just the economics of the cost to doing underwriting and the cost of your time to work with individual clients to educate them and to take the application. On the group side, because the process is streamlined, it actually does lower the entry point in which you can get people a plan, even at the starter plan. And I think it's important not to overlook the value of getting someone a little bit of coverage because
100%.
once they own a little bit, they believe in it more and they're willing to do more later. We can't do that if we start off at too high of a price point to start off with. The average premium on the group side, and you guys may be surprised to hear this, is $600 to $800 a year for a group life with long-term care rider. Our average premium is higher. The way we offer it and educate and design the products, ours is probably closer to 2 to 3 thousand a year. So more in line with, I'll call it a low price point individual product. But either way, you're in that whatever your range is, you have that ability to offer to that person that wants to spend $1,000 to $2,000 a year. And people's wallet share just keeps getting tighter. I don't think that is going to change either, right? People are very sensitive. It's hard for them to spend money, planning for their own retirement, let alone the long-term care costs, beyond retirement. So you have to give them more reasons and an easier way to access, those coverage levels, those benefits. I think that is a big deal. That's why Washington Cares is doing what they're doing with the payroll taxes too, is we kind of like left out a big segment of the market by not having an affordable price point.
Yeah, and that speaks down to the individual employee all the way up to the business owners, HR, benefit administrators, right? If it's a no-brainer to fund X amount of policies for, your entire employee base, that also accomplishes that same mission, right? Because psychologically, I've been saying this lately because I just notice in what we're seeing in our own group cases is there is something psychological about having to pay to go from nothing to even a little something, as opposed to already having a little something paid for you and then doing more because you've seen it and understand the value and actually become comfortable with what you have, right? So I think same deal. Employers are, you know, infinitely cautious about how much putting a plan together is going to cost for their employees. If you can make it a no-brainer, that accomplishes a ton all the way down to the end employee who then gets their foot in the door thanks to their employer and then feels comfortable expanding from there because of the education, right? It all kind of works in tandem.
Yeah. I think also you're going to see more insurance types of benefits in things like 401k plans, right? Having an annuity to create a lifetime income when people don't have defined benefit pension plans as much anymore and they have a lump sum, retirement account now, being able to annuitize that. I think those insurance benefits are going to become more popular as well. So this is going to go in lockstep, having long-term care insurance complementing the retirement plan. You're going to see some creative solutions there too, which are kind of quasi worksite related because of employers funding, and providing matches for 401k benefits.
Yeah, I think we tend to be very optimistic in general, but um, we don't think that either side should feel threatened by the other, because again, they are so synergistic and help each other more than they know. Whether you're just purely on the group side and don't yet understand all the things you can learn from the individual market that will give even more incentive for folks to, participate in your plans, or you're on the individual side and don't understand how many people may end up doing some sort of complementary coverage to what they're doing in the group space because they got a starter plan through their employer. There's a lot of kind of unknown synergy if you sit on one side of the fence or the other. That's why I'm saying we need to kind of build that bridge, continue to have those conversations, and understand that both work together to lift up the long-term care industry in different ways and just help more families. Anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts? I know, many of you who are on this call come from the Thursday study group as well. And we didn't really talk about individual products much there. We don't talk about group products much on this study group. So, there may be some new subject material for everyone. So if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to let us know. You can unmute, raise your hand, whatever you like. Rhonda, thank you for sharing your perspective too. There are a lot of really good nuggets that sometimes on the group space we just kind of plain overlook, right? Access to, um, partnership, and just the tax deductibility aspect, but also understanding the challenges and eases that the carriers who are dedicated can bring to the group market too.
Yeah, I'll talk also maybe a little bit about partners, referral partners, right? And that's the lifeblood, sometimes of being a specialist as you work with a financial planner and you're their trusted resource for the long-term care planning part of the process. Well, we have a lot of benefit brokers out there that work with employers and their benefits, and we get these questions all the time. I would say that long-term care is probably the hottest product right now in the voluntary benefits arena. Lot of interest, a lot of inquiries. So I think it's important to understand the group market also because you're working with those folks as referral partners and you have a lot of value to add there. That's what we've discovered as we kind of dove into that um, kind of marketplace. Individual products, like we talked about, have a place because a lot of those brokers have small business clients. But it's important for you to kind of know both sides because when they kind of refer a client over to you, you have to have a holistic picture and you have to know what the outcomes are going to look like and what their expectations are. So that's part of the reason also we did the Thursday study group is it's, helping you form a different language to work with people in the benefit space, to work with HR folks. They share a common language that is a little different from the individual side language. And it's important that you kind of speak that language so that it can kind of communicate effectively, and give them confidence, in what they're going to be offering to employees. They're putting their reputation on the line there too.
We say this on Thursdays a lot, but one thing that I want you to take with you is that by being a long-term care specialist, you have more knowledge than 99.999% of the employee benefits market when it comes to long-term care. There's very, very differentiated, information, knowledge. You can dive deeper and just find those little things to point out that are going to be really helpful to HR, educating their employees, business owners understanding the importance of this. You also know just the real life long-term care situations. I think that's one of the craziest things we find when we're educating large groups of employees is that many, even though they may have experienced it in whole or in part, have no clue about long-term care until they can kind of be brought to an understanding of how it's relative to their situation, right? They think about that story that even if it wasn't a direct family member, they've seen somebody receiving care, right? People out there are at such a base level, if not no level of knowledge about long-term care planning, that that's really the key to get people to moving forward. They need to understand what it is. Business owners need to understand that employees are showing up late and leaving work early because they're taking care of loved ones and they don't have, that professional caregiver who's coming in to help out. And what it does to families just trying to make ends meet for, a dear loved one who cannot help themselves in certain aspects of their life. It's that basic. And you guys, this is the back of your hand, right? So you can bring this into these conversations with confidence. You have resources here in your network to help you out with any sort of group discussion or planning or the process in general. So just lean on that, and I would say feel confident. And if it's something you want to add to your business, you can proactively have those conversations because a lot of what's required that others don't have is inside you because it's all you do. Um, I think that is about all I have. Um, for those who are asking for a link to the Worksite study group, it is this same link, this same time, every single Thursday. So, um, even if you want to just throw on your own calendar that time, Thursdays, 1 p.m. Pacific, I can also put a link in the chat right now if you'll give me 1 minute. Mark, while I'm grabbing that, any last thoughts you want to leave with everyone?
No, I'm so excited about where we are with the long-term care market. I feel like we've turned a corner in just having all of these new solutions out there. It's going to drive awareness and benefit the whole ecosystem. I think it's a supply-driven market, right? We learned when long-term care was in its heyday, we had over 100 traditional carriers, right, in the early 2000s, late 1990s, and it's declined, right? Now we have only a handful. Well, now we're starting to see new carriers entering again and awareness being built and them investing in marketing. And that's all positive across the board, whether it's individual or group. The fact that your client can come to you and ask you about this benefit is actually a door opener for you. So, yeah, I'm probably more excited about long-term care than I've ever been, and just what we're looking forward to, into this year. So we're doing a lot of enrollments, third and fourth quarter this year and into 2026. I think there are so many opportunities. If you're not finding those opportunities, you're not looking hard enough,
Yep.
quite frankly. So keep doing what you're doing. I think you'll be able to grow your business. Just keep focusing on the long-term care market.
Yeah, they may look different, walk different, talk different. It's all the same market, it's all the same industry with a lot of the same goals. So I think the sooner that you can kind of you know, commit that to memory and just overall thought, the better off you're going to be. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thanks to Rhonda for sharing her perspective. Hopefully, everybody out there learned something new today, whether you're primarily individual, primarily group, or curious about one or the other. We appreciate you very much. We'll see you this time next week. Everybody have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.